Are you tired of being called a casual? Are you tired of talking to yourself in comment sections of popular MMA YouTubers? Are you tired of being ignored in MMA live streams? Are you tired of people ignoring your MMA takes? Well, you've clicked on the right video. This is the ultimate guide to becoming a hardcore MMA fan and earning the respect of all your peers. Your quality of life, your status as a man or a woman, I don't judge, will reach new heights. So now that you know that you've come to the right place and that you really want to become a hardcore UFC fan and you really want to earn the respect of your peers, you want to earn the respect of MMA YouTubers, you want them to like and love your comment, well, let's get started with the first thing you must do to become that person. Well, the first thing you must do is you must watch every single UFC card from the prelims all the way to the main event. And not only do you have to watch every single card, but you have to boast about it. And any shitty card, you have to make sure to comment down below and say, man, this card is a banger. There's a lot of banger matchups on this card. Oh man, this should be a pay-per-view. Nicolaus versus Alex Perez. This should be a pay-per-view. Oh, Luis versus Nascimento. What a banger of a fight night for me, man. What a banger. What an absolute banger. Those are the things that you must say if you truly, truly want to become a UFC hardcore MMA fan. And anytime that somebody comments that in a post and whatever, on a UFC post, you know that they're a big fan of the sport and you know that they know what they're talking about. So that's the first thing that you must do. Now, the second thing you must do if you really want to become a hardcore UFC fan is that you become a huge fan of an unranked fighter. You say that they're going to become champion and make him your whole identity. So you get someone like Peyton Talbot, maybe Chase Hooper, and they become your whole identity. Every time they fight on the prelims of a fight, and you say, man, that's a future champion right there. That's a future champion. And by saying that, we know that you're a real hardcore UFC fan, and we know that what you're talking about. Now, the next thing you must do is a very important one. I think, this is probably one of the most important things that you must do if you really want to become a hardcore UFC fan, and that is become a contrarian. Go against popular MMA narratives. Oh, Alex Pereira, one of the best strikers? Nah, he's absolute fucking shit. Topuria doesn't have any power. Pillow punches. He couldn't knock out Josh Emmett, bro. You have to be contrarian. If you really want to be known, if you really want to get views, if you really want to get the response from MMA fans, from MMA YouTubers, you have to have contrarian takes, because that makes you seem as somebody that's not part of the pack, somebody that's not an NPC. You know what I'm saying? So you have to be a contrarian for you to be respected in the MMA fan community. Now, the next thing that you must do is you have to enjoy fights that people hate. Yoel Romero versus Adesanya was such a banger of a fight. Oh, Rolling the Mayunas versus Carlos Esparza too. There was a lot of technique in display, man. It was such a very technical fight. Now, the next thing you also must do, obviously including with that, Pantoja versus Royval 2 was an amazing fight. You have to predict that fights go to a split decision, man. Every time I see somebody say, oh man, this fight is going to go to a split decision, I'm like, that's a true fan right there. That's a true UFC fan. They know what the fuck they're talking about, because we all know that fights typically go to a split decision. And to, if somebody ever hits that prediction and it's actually right, they're going to look like an absolute genius, and you want to look like an absolute genius. So you have to predict from time to time that some fights are going to go to a split decision so you could look like an absolute genius. Now, the next thing that you also must do as a hardcore MMA fan is that you must call somebody a casual before they call you a casual. Because if you get the jump on them and you're like, no, you're the fucking casual, you already won, man. You already look like a hardcore MMA fan, and you already won, man. You're the king of the hill. So that's another thing that you must do. You must go to comment sections and call people casuals, call their takes casuals, because that's something that is part of the game. That's something that everybody has to do. Now, the next thing that you must do is you must watch a Weasel breakdown, and you must completely agree with it. You get your opinions from the Weasel. You every time you watch a fight and you don't really know who won that fight because you're a fucking NPC, you go watch the Weasel. He's gonna tell you who really won that fight, and then you stick to that take for life. That's something that you must do as a hardcore MMA fan. Now, the real hardcore test, man, this is the thing that you also must do if you really want to become a hardcore UFC fan, is that claim that older fighters such as Fedor will still be champions today, and claim that newer fighters aren't as good as they were in the past. If you have this kind of take, this is when I know that you're a real hardcore MMA fan, that you've been watching the sport for very long, that you know what you're talking about. That's the way that I know that you're not a casual, by saying that, these newer fighters are shit. Topuria, Islam, bullshit, man. It's all about fucking Anderson Silva, George St. Pierre. Those are absolute legends. Jose Aldo, he's a gold of featherweight, not Volkanovski. Fuck Volkanovski. Volkanovski absolutely sucks. I mean, do you think Aldo will get knocked out by Topuria? Absolutely fucking not, man. Fuck no. So that's a real hardcore MMA take that you must have if you want to get the respect of your peers. Now, another thing, this is kind of a little one. You must complain about the Venom shorts and talk about the Reebok shorts, because the Venom shorts are so ugly. You must complain about them. You have to talk about how Reebok was so much better, or how the shorts when they had the sponsorships were so much better, and how the UFC is falling off as a company. You have to have these kind of takes if you really want to be a hardcore MMA fan. Now, the next thing that you must claim is that you watch Conor McGregor on his rise. If you really want to be respected, man, if you watch the biggest star in the UFC on his rise, then I know you're a true UFC fan. And that's something that you must claim in every comment section of a Conor McGregor video for me to trust your MMA takes. Now, the next thing is, you must never be confident in any of your picks, because every fighter has a puncher's chance, man. I see this all the time, and every time I go to a video and I see somebody comment, Khrushchev is absolutely going to destroy Dustin Poirier, there's that one person that is commenting, what? Dustin Poirier has a good chance of beating Islam. He has a puncher's chance. That's how you know you're a true hardcore MMA fan, when you never count anybody out. You always say, you know what, that fighter has a puncher's chance. That's how I know you're a true MMA fan. When people say, oh, Weili versus Francis Ngannou, Weili has a puncher's chance. That's how I know that you know what the fuck you're talking about. That's how I know that you're a true MMA fan. So you got to make sure to say that. Now, the next phrase, this is a phrase that you have to say. If you're a true UFC fan, you have to say this phrase at least 30 times a day. Because if you don't say this, I don't think you know anything about fighting. I don't think you know anything about mixed martial arts. So you have to make sure to say this at least 30 times a day. You have to make sure to comment this down below in every prediction video and say, styles make fights. If any prediction you ever have for a fight, you have to say right after it, styles make fights. Styles make fights. Styles make fights. That's how I know you're an absolute genius, man. You have to say that, because if you don't, then people are not going to respect you. So that's a must do. Now, for the next part of becoming a hardcore UFC fan, if we ever have a watch party together, if you're ever as fortunate to be invited to a based MMA watch party, you must say a couple of things, actually a lot of things, while we're watching fights for me to know that you're a true hardcore UFC fan. And some of these are credit to Lucas Tracy. One, when we're watching a fight, you must say big meaty hooks. Big meaty hooks. Oh, pitter patter shots. He's landing pitter patter shots. Long rangy strikes from the outside. Long rangy strikes. Boring fight equals very technical fight. That's one thing. That's a very important one. Every time there's a boring fight that we just watch, you have to say, man, that was so technical. That was so high level. That's a must, especially when it comes to grappling. If the fight's just on half guard the whole fight, you have to call it very technical and very impressive, right? That's one big way for me to know that you're a true hardcore UFC fan. Now, another thing, this one's a very important one. Anytime that you get your picks wrong, you have to claim that MMA doesn't make any sense, right? Because that takes any accountability away from your wrong predictions. So you must make sure to never admit defeat, never admit that your takes are wrong or that they could change. and that MMA just doesn't make any sense, man. That MMA just doesn't make any sense. So another thing, credit to Lucas Tracy, cobblestone knees, man. Every time you talk about Kamaru Usman, you have to talk about cobblestone knees. And also another one, a very, very iconic one. You have to say a fighter's chinny. Oh, a fighter gets knocked out in the first round, he's chinny. Chinny, chinny, chinny. That's a very important one. Anytime somebody lands a low kick, nasty low kicks, nasty low kicks. And every time you see somebody land a low kick, you have to reference Conor McGregor versus Poirier 2 and how effective Poirier's leg kicks were against McGregor. If you're able to reference that, that's how I know you're a true hardcore UFC fan, and I'm going to be very impressed. Now, when a fighter is coming off a long layoff, you have to say, man, the fighter has been sitting on the shelf. That's a very important take. That's a very important phrase that you must say. Also, you have to say 1-2 down the pipe. That's a very important one. 1-2 down the pipe. Also, when somebody is very defensive, you have to say, you can't just say that the guy's very defensive or, has very good defense. You have to say he's very defensively sound. That's how you say it. Defensively sound is the way to put it. And every time there's a brawl, you have to say got the dog in him. Dirty, scrappy fight. That's very important. Also, on paper, you always have to bring that up. You have to pull up Anthony Smith and how on paper this fighter must win. All right, that's a good way also to not be accountable for your wrong prediction. So that's a very important one. Anytime somebody lands a hard shot, you have to bring it up. Oh, he just landed a hard shot. Also, anytime a fighter doesn't look like their usual self, you have to call them washed immediately. That's a very important one if we're watching UFC fights together. Imposing his will, that's a very important one. So anytime you're making a prediction, you have to discuss who's imposing their will, right? Is it going to be Pantoja? Is it going to be Steve Erceg? That's a very important one. The feints, oh man, Adesanya's feints are incredible. You have to bring up the feints for me to trust your analysis of a fight IQ. This is a very important one. You have to talk about a fighter's fight IQ for me to know that you're a true hardcore UFC fan. So these are just some sayings that you must say as we're watching UFC fights for me to know that you're a true hardcore UFC fan. So these are just some things that you can do for you to go from a casual to a hardcore UFC fan. You must follow this, man. I just gave you guys a blueprint to becoming a real hardcore UFC fan, and maybe this inspires you to make your own YouTube channel, make your own UFC YouTube channel, and you have to make sure that you bring up all these terms, all these things that I just brought up. You have to make sure to do that if you want to have a successful channel.